Assalamualaikum, Doctor. My name is Muhammad Safiq bin Omar from BA 2425G. So today, I would like to present about my research thesis, which the title is The Relationship Between my Selected Macroeconomic Variables, Population and Minimum Wages, and Unemployment Rate in ASEAN 5 countries, as my countries is Philippines. So, let's go further the discussion. For the problem statement, the lower unemployment rate can reduce government borrowing and aid economic development. In reality, when individuals are searching for a new job or leave education, there will be some frictional unemployment happen. Due to the current COVID-19 outbreak, the unemployment rate has been increased drastically in 2020 over the world, including ASEAN countries. According to Chong, Lee and Yip, 2020, Philippines unemployment rate in the first quarter of 2020 increased to 5.3% and continued to rise to as much as 17% in the second quarter of 2020. Therefore, this research is to investigate the relationship between inflation, economic growth, FDI, minimum wages, and population towards unemployment rate in Philippines. For the research objective, first, to examine the relationship between inflation and unemployment rate. Second, to investigate the relationship between economic growth and unemployment. Third, to identify the relationship between foreign direct investment and unemployment rate. Fourth, to determine the relationship between minimum wages and unemployment rate. And last, to discover the relationship between population and unemployment rates. For the scope study and limitation, the major focus on this research is to investigate the relationship between inflation, economic growth, FDI, minimum wages, and population toward unemployment rate. The first limitation of the study is the lack of available data. Some of the statistics on the website are limited, and it is quite difficult to get the accurately. Secondly, we had found that there is a lack of accessible information in this research. There is some information are strenuous to obtain because it is not published publicly and cannot be downloaded freely. For the literature review and the theoretical part, first is Philip curve, relationship between inflation and employment rate. Second is Akon's law theory, relationship between economic growth and employment rate. Third, FDI theory, relationship between foreign direct investment and employment rate. Fourth is classical and Keynesian theory, relationship between minimum wages and unemployment rate. And lastly, Malthus's theory and optimum theory, relationship between population and unemployment rate. Next, for the empirical inflation. First, according to Vangelli and Agoli 2017, it is found that inflation has a negative relationship with employment level. They conducted the research by using time series data 1995 until 2013 to investigate the relationship between inflation and unemployment. Second, in a study of South Africa, Modukur and Kasir in 2018, explored the long-run relationship between inflation and unemployment. The result found that there is a negative relationship between inflation and unemployment. For economic growth, first, based on Dare and Hack 2016, they studied the relationship between economic growth and unemployment. The result found out that there is a significant negative relationship between economic growth and unemployment. Second, another study from Hallerian, Belgium, and Karabulu 2009, they believe there is a negative relationship between economic growth and unemployment rate. They state in the studies that economists purely need growth to create more jobs. For foreign direct investment, based on Johnny, Timmy Perry, Krokeme, and Mark Jackson 2018, analyzed a research based in Nigeria. According to the findings, the relationship between FDI and the unemployment rate is insignificant and negative. Second, Kurtovic, Silchikovic, and Milanovic 2015 studied the relationship between FDI and unemployment in the Western Balkans countries. The result showed a negative relationship between FDI and unemployment. For minimum wages, based on Kemal and Kocaman 2019, minimum wage effect long and short term. The study indicates that increase in minimum wage affects changes depends on either long or short term. Next, research study by Arfeld, Roth, and Sedel 2018 in Germany shows that increase by 1% minimum wages will lead to decrease in unemployment rate by 0.05% in 2015 and 2016. For population, based on Imtiaz et al. 2020, population is one of the factors contribute to the unemployment in Pakistan. There is positive relationship between population and unemployment in Pakistan. Other findings by Kalin 2003 shows that there is a positive relationship is assumed to hold between unemployment and population in determinants of unemployment in Pakistan. As you can see from the theoretical framework, this study investigates the relationship between selected macroeconomic variables, minimum wages, population, and unemployment rate in ASEAN 5 countries. The hypotheses are as following. H1. There is no relationship between inflation and unemployment rate. There is a relationship between inflation and unemployment rate. H2. There is no relationship between economic growth and unemployment rate. There is a relationship between economic growth and unemployment rate. H3. There is no relationship between foreign direct investment and unemployment rate. There is a relationship between foreign direct investment and unemployment rate. H4. There is no relationship between minimum wages and unemployment rate. There is relationship between minimum wages and unemployment rate. H5. There is no relationship between population and unemployment rate. There is relationship between population and unemployment rate. For the methodology, first, dependent variable unemployment rate. We use U as proxy and data sources mainly from Kenoima, Index Mundi, and Y charts. Next, independent variable for inflation, we use INF as proxy and data sources mainly from Macrotrends and Statista. For economic growth, we use GDP as proxy and data sources from Macrotrends. For foreign direct investment, we use FDI as proxy and data sources from Macrotrends and the global economy. For the minimum wages, we use MW as proxy and data sources from World Bank. Lastly, population, we use SPOP as proxy and data sources mainly from macro trends. For the finding and analysis, based on the table, firstly, we run the first diagnostic check, which is variance inflation factor VIF, to check the multicollinearity. The rule of thumb for VIF is score ranging between the 1 and 5 is acceptable. As for Philippines, the score for all variables are below 5. Thus, we accept all variables including INF, GDP, FDI, MW, and POP. So we can proceed with the second diagnostic check. Next stage is Dubel-Watson to detect any serial correlation in error terms. Rule of thumb for Dubel-Watson stat has to fall within the range 1.5 until 2.5. If the Dubel-Watson stat did not fall within the range, serial correlation between the error term exists. As for Philippines, the Dubel-Watson stat did not fall within the range of 1.5 until 2.5. Serial correlation between the error terms exists. Thus, we must run a Bruce-Godfrey test to minimize the residual correlation. Next, after run the Bruce-Godfrey, the Dubel-Watson stat value for BG test is 1.72 within the range. Therefore, we do not need to run UV-REST. After that, we run the normality test to measure whether residuals are normally distributed or not. The rule of thumb is p-value of the cobera is not significant. We can reject the rationale. Therefore, the conclusion is our residuals are not normally distributed. For Philippines, the result for p-value of Jacobera is 0.011844, which is less than 0.05. Thus, we do not have enough evidence to reject the null hypothesis and may conclude that residuals are not normally distributed for sample of this time series model. Now, we can proceed with the basic time series analysis, which is regression. For regression, based on t-stat and p-value, the significant level for inflation, economic growth, and population are insignificant. Meanwhile, foreign direct investment are 10% significant and minimum wages are 1% significant. Based on adjusted R-square, it indicates that 66.96% of the variation in the dependent variable can be explained by foreign direct investment and minimum wages in the model. The remaining 33% is due to commission of other important independent variable. Based on F-test, we have enough evidence to reject null hypothesis because the p-value is significant level of F-stat with 1%. Therefore, we can conclude that there is a significant relationship between foreign direct investment and minimum wages with unemployment rate. For the implication of study, first to central bank as policymaker, this research will assist the policymaker to interpret and make better decisions on controlling the economy and solving unemployment. Second, to investor, the investor can use recent unemployment statistics to judge which sectors are losing jobs rapidly in the overall economic climate. related to future researchers, it can help them to be a better analyst and a potential guide for further studies in the future. First, to organization, the businesses can improve the management by giving the right employee benefits and compensation to captive the potential employees. Last, to the society, it will definitely open the mind among our society and explore them about the factors that influence the unemployment rate in the countries. As for the conclusion, in five ASEAN countries, in a nutshell, inflation has a positive influence on unemployment rate in Indonesia, while inflation has a negative influence on unemployment rate in Vietnam. Besides, economic growth has a positive influence on unemployment rate in Thailand, according to the empirical result. As for FDI, it has a negative influence on unemployment rate in Malaysia, Philippines, including Thailand. Minimum wages for Malaysia, Philippines, and Vietnam have a negative influence on unemployment rate. Lastly, population has a positive influence on unemployment rate in Indonesia. Therefore, the related parties in these five countries need to play their significant role in order to reduce the unemployment rate. The recommendation for future research work was not researchers that are interested in further studying this paper. I highly recommend to expand the sample size to more than 30 observations. Researchers may use monthly, quarterly, or semi-annual data instead of using annual data. This is because the bigger the sample size, the lower the probability of having multicollinearity and autocorrelation problem. Last but not least, replacement of insignificant variable with other relevant variables or adding in new variables such as education level, technology changes, and aggregate demand will further improve the model. So, that's all from me. Thank you.